Aita, drama, secrets, confessions. Welcome to Trove Reddit.
My family has always lived under a secret that no one outside of us knows. They call it the protection tradition, but in reality, it's a nightmare that has lasted for generations. At my house, not every girl is free. Each generation, one girl is chosen to live in a thick-walled room, where not a single sound escapes, becoming the target of all the anger and fear of the men in the house. I remember the first time I saw that room. The smell of damp concrete and cold iron made me shiver. My grandfather built it with his own hands, so proud that he said, "This is how we protect the family." The beatings, the punishments I witnessed as a child, did more than hurt the body, they planted fear deep in the soul. I grew up in fear, afraid to speak, afraid to call the police, because my family had taught me one lesson. Silence is survival. If you want to know what I did to break this horrifying tradition, hit the subscribe button now so you don't miss the next part. I still remember the first time I witnessed that ritual, as if it had been etched into my eyes forever. My cousin, Leora, had just turned 16, was led down to the basement on a bright sunny afternoon, while everything outside was eerily silent. My family lined up, as if attending a solemn ceremony, but in their hands were strange gifts. Chains, gloves, and a cold silver collar. My grandmother stood beside them, smiling, but her eyes held something that made my hair stand on end. I was too young to fully understand, but I saw Leora biting her lip to keep from crying, her eyes looking at me for help, while I was helpless, my legs trembling. They began the ritual. The silver collar was locked around her ankle, every laugh and word of instruction passed through the basement door slit. But what terrified me the most were the sounds coming from the basement. I heard strange whispers, as if the thick walls amplified pain and fear. Once, I saw my uncle bring down an old camera, recording every gesture of my cousin, and they said, "Everything is for the girls of the future to learn endurance." I saw blood on the walls, but they said it was a sign of growing up. From that moment, I realized. This tradition was not just violence, it was a psychological maze, where every girl was turned into a living nightmare. If you can imagine that fear, hit the subscribe button now. In the next part, I will reveal secrets that even my family dared not expose. Everything changed that afternoon when I was hiding in the attic, listening to the wind howl through the vents. Can you imagine the feeling of hearing cries for help and not being able to do anything? I realized that the sounds from the basement weren't just echoes, they were a bridge to all of the family's horrifying secrets. Lena, the newly chosen cousin, was crying quietly, begging someone to help her. That was the moment I decided. I would no longer stay silent. What would you do if you were in my place? Would you have the courage to stand up? I began planning. Every step was secret, like a spy. I mapped out the entire ventilation system, secretly observing the visits of my father, uncles, and grandfather. I hid a mini recorder in the vents, capturing every word, every breath, every quiet moan of Lena. Do you believe that a child could silently gather evidence without anyone noticing? I found ways to slip medicine and food through the vents, helping her survive the horrific days. I couldn't do it alone. I convinced my 3 cousins to join me, each with a skill. Nina memorized every branch of the vents, Vera learned how to pick locks quietly, and Becca documented every detail. We became a team, operating in the shadows, under the family's eyes without them ever knowing. But I also had to face the greatest fear. If we were discovered, who would believe me? Once, an uncle passed by the basement, and I had to hide in a closet, listening to every step pause at the door, my heart pounding as if it would burst. Do you think silence can sometimes be more dangerous than action? We gathered evidence for 6 months. Recordings, photos, journals of every act of abuse, every injury. I saw Lena so exhausted she could barely see the light, yet in her eyes was a glimmer of hope, knowing someone was fighting for her. And then, I knew I had to act before Christmas when the family would perform the ritual to replace the victim. I prepared everything. Hidden cameras, live streaming phones, a secret movement plan. If you were me, would you dare to go live to expose all your family's horrifying secrets? That day, everything would explode, every secret brought into the light. Hit the subscribe button now so you don't miss the next part, where I will confront my family directly and witness the storm of truth about the break. On Christmas Day, the outside world shimmered and felt warm, but inside my house, everything was about to explode. Can you imagine standing in front of your entire family, knowing that if you fail, everything you've done will vanish into smoke? I held my phone carefully, the camera live streaming, every finger trembling, but determination burning inside me. My family gathered around the basement, my grandmother holding the ritual bell, a smile of authority on her lips. Lena stood there, exhausted and terrified, tears glistening in her eyes, not knowing what would happen next. What would you do if a loved one was being taken as a sacrificial victim right before your eyes? I turned on the camera, the vivid sound echoing through the living room. Enough. I shouted. Everyone turned, eyes wide with shock. I began playing 6 months of recordings through the mini speaker. Groans, cries for help, the twisted instructions, every detail documented like a living verdict. The family screamed, rushing to grab the phone, but we were prepared. My cousins formed a protective circle, every move carefully planned. Do you believe a child and 3 cousins could stand against an entire powerful family? My grandfather glared, chest tight, as if the whole world was collapsing before him. What are you doing? My father roared. But at that moment, police sirens blared outside, fully equipped federal agents stormed the basement. Everyone froze, terrified, unsure how to react. Can you imagine this scene? A powerful family, steeped in tradition for generations, suddenly surrounded by law and living evidence. The agents ordered everyone to stand still, taking photos, inspecting, documenting the scene. I stood there, heart pounding, sweat dripping from my forehead, yet inside I felt a strange joy. It was all about to end. But then, just when I thought victory was near, my grandmother whispered something to my father, their eyes flashing cunningly. Do you want to know what she was about to do to try to turn the tables? In the next part, I will reveal the shocking twists no one expected, as the horrifying tradition fights to survive in the blink of an eye. After the day the police stormed in, I thought it was all over. But in reality, it was just the beginning. Do you believe my family was only the tip of the iceberg? Just a few days later, when I brought all the evidence to Attorney Brian's office, he looked at me with a serious expression. You know, Lila, your family isn't the only case, he said, his voice low and thunderous. I felt my heart leap out of my chest. It turned out that, through old records, Brian discovered 15 families across the states maintaining similar traditions. Soundproof basements, silver collars, and victims chosen starting at age 16. Can you imagine it? Powerful, wealthy families, protected by law, secretly sharing this horrifying practice with each other. Brian began tracking the surviving victims. I met Sarah, Maria, and Jennifer, girls who had escaped those nightmare homes. Each told a story I had never dared to imagine. Christmas parties turned into rituals, silver collars as symbols of control, and judges, police, even lawyers entangled in the network. Have you ever heard of a family crime network so widespread that the law turns a blind eye? We started cataloging all the evidence. Photos, recordings, medical records, detailed journals spanning decades. Every page of documents made me shiver. But the climax hadn't stopped there. One day, while reviewing files, my phone buzzed. An unknown number sent a message. They know what you're doing. Stop now, or you'll be next. What would you do if you knew your very life was in danger? I decided to keep going, without a second thought. Brian prepared to file the case in federal court, bypassing all local power. But before we could enter the courtroom, a package appeared at my door. Inside was a silver collar identical to my family's, along with a photo of Lena, eyes pleading for help. My heart felt like it stopped. Can you guess who sent that package? In the next part, I will detail the first federal trial, where the secrets of 15 families are exposed, and this terrifying network of power will face its ultimate test. On the first day of the federal trial, I walked into the courtroom with a mix of anticipation and fear. Can you imagine standing before the judges your entire family once trusted to protect them? Brian walked beside me, my hand gripping the evidence folder tightly, every photo, recording, and medical journal. The moment the opposing attorney faced us, I realized. They weren't just surprised, they were afraid. I sat in the witness chair, glancing at Lena beside me. She trembled, yet her eyes still held hope. Are you ready to testify fully in court? Brian asked. Yes, Lena exhaled, her voice barely quivering. As we began playing the recordings, the entire courtroom fell silent. Have you ever heard the sound of breath, moans, and horrific instructions echo through a room, forcing everyone to look down? Then the first twist occurred. One of my family's defense attorneys stood up, confessing that he himself had been a victim of this system as a child. The courtroom went into shock. Do you think someone who once suffered could become a key figure in saving others during a trial? It didn't stop there. When Brian submitted additional evidence related to 14 other families, a judge suddenly banged the gavel, calling the trial to a halt. Why? I shuddered. It turned out that some federal files had been hidden for 20 years, and the court demanded we prove federal jurisdiction. Amid the chaos, my phone buzzed. A strange video arrived, showing another girl being prepared for the ritual, with footage of people in the courtroom sending messages outside. Can you imagine feeling relief at the court proceeding, yet terror knowing the enemy is still watching? Brian immediately requested the trial continue under special protection measures, but tension stretched tighter than a bowstring. And the cliffhanger. As I looked down the back row, my grandmother's gaze met mine, cold smile, hand pressing on her phone, as if sending a message only I could understand. Can you guess what she was doing? In the next part, I will detail the explosive courtroom scenes, the shocking schemes, and the decision that made the entire family's blood run cold. The trial that day was temporarily adjourned. It resumed 3 days later. And on that federal court day, I stepped into the courtroom once again, my heart pounding wildly. Can you imagine standing before 15 powerful families who have spent their entire lives hiding horrifying secrets? Brian whispered, "Today, everything will be exposed." As we continued playing the recordings, the moans, the screams, the clanging of metal, the courtroom fell silent, the jury staring wide-eyed. The first shocking twist. A judge who had previously ignored abuse cases appeared as a witness, confirming that old records had been systematically concealed. Do you believe that power in the law can be manipulated for decades? Then the next twist nearly made me faint. From the third row, my grandmother smirked, pressing a button on her phone, and immediately, a large screen in the courtroom displayed another girl trapped in a room identical to the basement in my house. Everyone froze. You think she still had the power to instill fear, even in a courtroom? But we were prepared. Brian immediately contacted federal agents. The security team cut all network connections and protected all witnesses. I stood up, hands shaking but voice firm. There is overwhelming evidence that 15 families across 4 states maintained a tradition of violence, using silver collars, basements, and forcing victims from age 16. Images, recordings, medical records, and detailed journals flooded the courtroom. And the final jaw-dropping twist. My father, the very one who had orchestrated the ritual, stood up, confessing all his crimes in court, but emphasizing that he had been protected by a mysterious force, implying that the network of power was even larger than we imagined. Can you guess what this would lead to? My grandmother sneered at me and Lena, her gaze icy. Do you really think you've won? Meanwhile, phones kept buzzing, and federal officers scrambled to manage alerts from the other families. I felt my heart race, cold sweat dripping down, knowing that a new wave of confrontation was coming beyond the courtroom and beyond the law. Do you think justice can truly prevail when power, tradition, and fear have been entrenched for generations? In the next part, I will reveal how we face the still living network, the unimaginable schemes, and the final decision that changed the lives of every girl in the family. Hit the subscribe button now so you don't miss the shocking finale and the truths your family never imagined. On the final day at the federal court, the tension was so thick I felt as if every breath was being blocked. Have you ever felt the entire world pressing down into a single moment? Lena, Nina, and the other girls stood beside me, trembling, yet their eyes burned with fire. Hope and determination intertwined in every gesture. Brian whispered, "Today, we will set them free." As the last piece of evidence was presented, images of the basements, silver collars, detailed journals spanning decades, every eye in the courtroom turned to my grandmother and the family members. Can you imagine the feeling of seeing the person who spread fear their entire life, finally forced to face justice? My grandmother stiffened, but no confident smile remained on her lips. A surprising twist. A federal agent revealed that the files of the 14 other families had also been collected, meaning the network of power across the states was collapsing completely. I heard Lena exhale in relief, followed by the sobs of the girls' families, a mix of relief, fear, and anger. Do you believe justice can come from children who dare to stand against generations of violence? When the court officially issued its verdict, the families were prosecuted. My father, grandfather, uncles, aunts. All were taken away, collars removed, basements locked and sealed. Lena hugged me, crying uncontrollably. Finally, we are free. But the final twist made my heart stop. A mysterious letter from my grandmother arrived at Brian's office, with only one line. Traditions can be broken, but the darkness will always return. Do you think everything is truly over? I held Lena's hand, promising to protect her, but I knew in my heart that breaking this tradition was only the first step. The girls were placed in a protection center, receiving psychological care and learning to trust the world outside again. I returned to school, continuing my studies in social work, determined to help other families escape the cycle of violence. Looking at the group photo we took outside the courthouse, I saw eyes glowing with hope, yet the shadows of the past still lingered. Do you want to know what our next steps will be, and whether the darkness will truly disappear? Hit the subscribe button now to follow the full journey from darkness to light, from fear to freedom, the untold story, dramatic, shocking, and full of surprises. See you in the next episodes.